we could be top of the league on Christmas Day, which is just absolutely mental to say. Like,
book it.
Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, Aston Villa are officially in the title race. Nobody can dispute it now after this game. Brentford 1, Aston Villa 2. That was quite the game, wasn't it, mate? That was quite the occasion. A lot happened. There was a lot to digest, hence why we're here the day after.
Yes, the margins, mate. The margins. When you're in this neck of the woods, when you're at the top of the league, so often, especially in tricky away games and everything like that, we mentioned that Brentford have only lost, I think, 4 times at home since the start of last season, which is a pretty incredible run. You need to come on top of the margins, and it's often these small things, the intangibles, more often than not, that define whether you end up in a European race, in the race for the top 4, or whether you're competing at the business end at the end of the season. And this game swung back and forth. Even after Villa took the lead, there was crazy things happening all over the pitch. There was all those scuffles and everything like that. But Villa had the minerals to get it done right at the end. And especially against 10 men, you need to do that in these away games. And Villa did it. So you're absolutely right, mate. We're in prime position. And if we get the win this Friday, we can go top of the league.
It's mental, mate, isn't it? It's mental. I think it requires a draw in the Arsenal-Liverpool game, which is going to be box office. That should be a great game. Hopefully better than the Liverpool-United game that we had last night. Sorry, my throat just went there. That was quite... it sort of failed to impress, really, for Super Sunday. But saying that, I think Liverpool had something stupid, like 33 shots, didn't they? But yeah, we could be top of the league on Christmas Day, which is just absolutely mental to say. Like,
book it.
Yeah, we're all gonna want to make sure we use our annual leave accordingly with the Premier League ending and potentially the Conference League, which is something we're going to talk about in a little bit, as well as at the time of recording, the draw is happening right now, so we're going to talk about that later on. And I think what's most impressive, the fact that we came back in this game, mate. We've rinsed and repeated the stats so many times. It must be boring for Villa fans to hear about how often when we concede first, we don't go on and win games. The narrative around away form is now starting to change, mate, because we're currently 6th in the away league. If you were to split it up like that, we sit 6th in the Premier League away form league. 1st in the home form, which is obviously spectacular. And as Matt Mayer pointed out from the Express and Star, that's now 7 points from losing positions in the last 3 away games. That's just mad. Like, we're seeing that transformation with our eyes, and it's even more impressive the fact that we did this without both Douglas Luiz and Luca Dean. I mean, Alex Moreno could have had like 6 goals yesterday, if we're being completely honest. Like, some of the chances that we created early on in this game. So we did this without 2 key players. And the upcoming fixtures are going to be difficult, mate, because Boubacar Kamara won't be available for 3 of them, which is something I'm sure we'll get to as well. But to concede literally like seconds before the half-time whistle, it's usually the sort of worst time to concede. But I think with Emery and just his sort of style and how he likes to sort of give as much information to the players as possible, it probably came at a semi-decent time because, like, it was still fresh. He knew he could get a reaction out of the lads and, really kick things into, second, third gear in the second half.
Yeah, it didn't feel like we were totally at the races, to be honest with you, in the first half. And it kind of felt like I don't want to say the goal was coming, but I don't think it really shocked anyone. And it was really bizarre, actually, when that goal went in, because it's not great defending from the Villa boys. And it kind of, we mentioned that in the preview, Villa are unbeaten in the capital since the last defeat, which was the 3-0 at Craven Cottage last season, which proved to be the game that Gerrard was sacked as a result of. And that goal was kind of like the ghosts of the past
It was.
back out of nowhere, didn't it? Like the really bad defending from the corner. It's kind of no one takes command of that situation. There's some really limp efforts to try and clear it, and it falls at the feet of Lewis Potter, who just like finishes it. It's just a real kind of messy goal, and it kind of took me by surprise because one of the things that I think we've taken for granted, perhaps in the Uno reign, is how good defensively we've been.
Yeah.
And we've been like pretty rock solid. It's more often than not the free flowing attacking football or the amount of goals we score, particularly in home games, that gets a lot of the credit. But we're actually so solid defensively, and we don't make those kind of errors very often, if at all, anymore. And so it was a weird goal to kind of see the Villa concede, because we don't really do that anymore. But I think it gave Unai the impetus at half time to really reset, make some changes, implement a game plan for the second half. And more often than not, when he does that, we go on and get it right. It'd be interesting to know whether we'd still have seen the same outcome had Brentford still had 10 men.
Well,
but yeah, that's by the by.
Of course. And I think, we highlighted in the preview, mate, if Brentford were going to score, it was going to be a set piece. So this isn't this is something that we could have probably seen coming at some point. So they're very excellent at set pieces. And yeah, I think the world is really sort of starting to open their eyes to again, something that I mentioned in the preview, just how much of a horrible team Brentford are, on the pitch.
Yeah.
They'll do anything to win, and it is admirable to a point. I do have a lot of time for that. And again, mate, I know you don't like talking about referees. We have to talk about David Coote, because he has a reputation. Yes. This is a reputation. And after the game, I was speaking to my friend Austin, who plays for Sheffield United, and he said when he was at Arsenal that they had a meeting with the players, like they do at the start of the season, referees and that. And David Coote literally said, I give out the most cards, so watch out. There was 11 yellow cards. There was 2 red cards. One yellow, obviously, one of those yellows was obviously for Unai Emery as well. Mm-hmm. He did not have control of that game whatsoever. And I'm not going to come on this podcast and say that we were, innocent at all, because Emi certainly provoked Maupay quite a bit throughout this game, especially towards the last stages. And it's probably the reason that Booba gets himself sent off, really. But we can't, first of all, we can't sort of lower ourselves to that level. It's quite disappointing that the game ended how it did for us. But David Coote allowed the game to go that way. He did not officiate this game properly at all. Mm-hmm. If I'm being completely objective, I don't think that the penalty shot on Ben Mee was a penalty. And no, sorry, I thought that one was more of a penalty than the Maupay one later on in the game.
Yeah.
But even then, it's pretty soft. But I can see why Brentford feel hard done by there. And the decision to give Ben Mee a red card, first of all, is correct anyway. And I don't think they can have any issues with that, especially after the challenge, I can't remember who it was, on John McGinn that went to VAR and not a single card was given for that. So that was quite clearly a tighten up exercise, because David Coote was doing a very poor job of officiating this game. And it's really that moment, that Ben Mee challenge, the game really did start to sort of flip on its head a little bit. There wasn't that bite, there wasn't that aggression. And people will go, oh, why do you care? This, that. Ben Mee has a reputation for this. And Villa fans know this firsthand. He's a thug. He does this so often. And I think, you'll have Spurs fans piping up after the whole Matty Cash thing, which was just completely blown out of proportion anyway. Especially if you look at any of Spurs' games since then, their players have made tackles that are arguably significantly worse, and you don't see anyone else crying about it. It's a real shame that David Coote is shit at his job, really, because there's another there's an alternative universe, mate, where a penalty is given to Brentford, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah, no, yeah, right.
And at the Thomas Frank is right to point out that at the time of the Maupay one as well, that there's a potential opportunity to double their lead there, and we may not come back. And I'm not going to... Obviously, the game went how it went. I'm happy we won and all that kind of stuff, but it's frustrating that in the Premier League, this is still happening. And again, mainly just the lack of control at the end with that big brawl. I've not seen scenes like that for a long time. That's really disappointing.
Yeah, it's really a good example of kind of how the referee sets the tone, and it was really in the aftermath of that me tackle and the eventual red card that this game really, the kind of feeling in the game really started to turn. And it sounds like there'd been stuff going on for all throughout the game, which had kind of constituted to what felt like a bit of bad blood between the teams. You know, you've got the abuse that Ollie was receiving throughout the 90, which obviously provoked his celebration at the end, which I really don't think that, you know, we need to have anyone that really like is looking at Ollie there and having a go at him for kind of aggravating fans or whatever it is. Like, there really needs to be a better discourse in terms of it's really obviously often not okay to give the players the kind of abuse that they receive from the stands, particularly when, you know, Ollie's saying it was revolving around his family or whatever that is. So apparently that had been going on through the game. And obviously, you know, from here at the Villa Philip podcast, Ollie Watkins, you have our full support, mate.
Absolutely.
But Ben Mee, obviously the red card happens. And after that, the game really got heated. And it'd be really interesting to know whether or not you get those scenes at the end, if that situation had been handled better. I think at first, the fact that it was only a yellow and then it was upgraded to a red, I think they were saying on comms that it's like Ben Mee's first tackle since first red card, since 2013 or something crazy.
So hard to believe, isn't it?
I know. I couldn't believe it. How has this guy been getting away with for it so long? If that incident wasn't a red card, all the other ones accumulated certainly were. So he's well overdue a red card. So Ben Mee gets sent off, and then, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that goes on at the end. There's Emmy and Morpie Volume 1, and then it kind of happens later on when he tries to pick him up off the floor. Booba's reaction is just silly, man. And, like, you know, he kind of gets sent off. Unai said that he was really disappointed in the team kind of collectively by how they handled that situation. And we certainly could have done without it. You know, Booba's obviously going to get himself a suspension now, and we'll have to go a fair few games without him. We get Dougie back, thankfully, for this game on Friday. So he'll be back. Booba will then go out. And Booba, I genuinely think both you and I have said this season how, you know, maybe his form levels are kind of wavered at points. He's not as been reached the lofty heights that maybe he reached last season. But I think we saw when we took him out, certainly I saw, mate, and how you feel, that it was like, oh, wow, Booba clearly brings things that necessarily don't stand out, and we definitely suffered without him. And so he will be a big miss. Thankfully, I feel like the squad is stepping up now to a point where you have to imagine that we can get through this period okay. But yeah, it was a really quite unsavoury end to what had been genuinely like quite a good game until that point. I think it was one where perhaps there wasn't necessarily the goals, but I still think it was one that was very entertaining. But at the end of the day, it kind of happens and everything like that. And these are the things which create rivalries between two teams.
Right.
Like, and you kind of get them throughout the league. Like, we kind of have this thing with Newcastle because of the sub on the time banners and everything like that. These things that happen totally outside of a footballing sphere that can create real bad blood between teams. And you just wonder, given the kind of how, you know, the fact that Brentford have often been a bogey team for everything like that for the Villa over the years when we're in the Championship and everything like that, whether maybe this is the start of something new between these two teams, given that we've been operating in pretty similar spheres as well, obviously fighting for Europe last season together and everything like that. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's certainly the game at Villa Park in the back end of this season will, you know, teams will be wanting to settle a score for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And like, ultimately, I don't have an issue with, as you say, just to echo your thoughts on Ollie. He's well within his rights to do that. If you're going to give it, you have to take it. Obviously, a little brawl happens there as well, really, doesn't it? With where sort of Ezra is involved as well. I don't have an issue with these guys like getting involved when things are getting a bit heated and that kind of thing. You want to see that kind of passion. You want to see people who are willing to, you know, fight for the club without actually having to fight. Obviously, don't ever condone that. I just like I'm probably the most disappointed in Emmy, because as much as I love his shithousery, as much as I love his antics, like him going down when Morpie like shoulder barged him, that's, you know, it's dramatic, but that's fair game, and we know Emmy's going to do that. And you've even got the added element of like the France-Argentina thing there as well, right? You can take that. Maupay has basically done the same thing there afterwards, hasn't he? He's thrown himself on the floor, and it's just a bit like, come on, Emmy. Like, as much as I would have probably done the same thing and tried to like pick him up, there's just a way of going about it. And again, like, thankfully it didn't happen, but there's a world where Emmy gets a red card in this situation as well, with maybe a more competent referee. So it's one of them where it's like, Booba's going to be a massive miss. We can't understate that. But I think we got to consider ourselves pretty lucky as well that Emmy managed to avoid that. And like, for me as well, so like, if you're going to get a red card, at least just fucking hit the cunt. Do you know what I mean?
I was going to say.
It's so soft.
Properly.
Yeah, like, if you're going to go, like, you're missing 3 games. At least actually done some damage, Booba. Come on. But I mean, I don't think he's capable. I don't think he's capable. But
he's a nice guy. Do you think? Can I flip that on its head, mate, and just say that, you know, like, and this isn't necessarily a point. I just want to kind of play devil's advocate here and throw it back to you. But if you and I have said in recent years that Villa were too nice and we lacked a bit of those dark arts, and we would necessarily, other teams would come to Villa Park and we'd go away and we'd be subject to those, and we had a team that was too nice, and often we couldn't live up to that. Do you think that, you know, whilst we're talking about coming on the right side of margins and being a title-winning side and everything like that, if you look at the greatest title-winning sides throughout kind of Premier League history, there is always that kind of element to those themes. Do you think there's kind of having guys like Emmy? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I still think we're not nasty enough though. We're like,
yeah,
and I think as well, like, we get penalised in situations where like the other teams wouldn't. Like, Manchester City are the worst for little niggling fouls, kicking you when you're off the ball, stamping on toes, surrounding the referee as well. And I mean, like, none of that necessarily happened yesterday in that situation. You could see David Coote was waiting for that all to play out, and even when he dished out cards, it didn't stop it. So, you know, his policing of the game was just shocking. But I just feel like the bigger teams get away with it. Like, like, I know I've just said, at least, you know, hitting Booba, but like, knowing us, we'd get a retrospective ban. Whereas if that was Arsenal, City, United, they'd somehow get away with it. I think we all know why. Something to do with envelopes and whatnot and cash. But that's obviously not for us to say. I do think we are too nice. I think we're getting nastier, but we're not. Like, people don't, because you don't see it on TV, do you? You don't see, like, Guardiola, like, again, like, his PR is crazy. His Man City PR is crazy because that's one of the dirtiest teams the Premier League has ever seen, and I feel like it's very rarely spoken about. But yeah, I think it's definitely something we can improve. But I guess, like, listening to Emery's comments after the game as well, I don't think he wants that. He doesn't. He's not like, we're not Diego Simeone. We're not Atletico Madrid. We're not. There isn't like an us against them mentality in this team. Like, I feel like the motivation comes from Unai and not from like external factors. Do you know, like, when I mentioned Atletico Madrid, do you know what I mean? Like, it's that there's very much a culture there of like, we're the underdogs. Like, no, like, these guys don't believe we can do this, so we're gonna hit harder. We're gonna run faster. We're gonna tackle hard. All this kind of stuff. That, like, you know, that's a culture that Simeone's created at that club. I just don't think Unai's like that.
No, I do agree, mate. I think one thing we have to be careful of, particularly with guys like Emmy, is that they don't build up a reputation.
Yeah.
Because you can see players handled very differently in this league based on their kind of track record. So if you take United and City as example, Rodri might get treated very differently for an orange card level tackle than, say, Casemiro would.
Yeah.
Because of the reputation that precedes Casemiro in the game. And you kind of think with Emmy, given what he did with Maupay, in that if people start to, well, I think not even start to, I think Emmy definitely does have a reputation for deviling in that side of the game, that he doesn't pick up such rougher treatment and stuff like that. I think so often the top teams, when they get involved with those dark arts of the game and everything like that, it's their ability to get away with it.
Yeah.
As you say, like, you kind of mentioned Pep Guardiola's Manchester City side. They do tactical fouls galore. You very rarely get a breakaway against Manchester City. And David Silva was always someone that was very good at this. Fernandinho was another one as well that would commit so many tactical fouls, but because he didn't have that kind of reputation, wouldn't get that kind of tackle. We saw it this weekend with that challenge that Edison made on, was it Mateta?
Oh, mate, yeah. And that went completely under the radar.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I'm talking about, in that you can kind of do those things and you might get an occasional booking and stuff like that. It's only really Rodri in that Nottingham Forest game where we've seen Man City they've had a straight red from Manchester City is almost unheard of. And maybe that's the difference. It's doing these things and basically getting away with it.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough. Like, I mean, I'm all for hard tackles. I'm all for all that, but I don't think I could get away with it in the game. So, I think and Emmy's already got a reputation though, hasn't he? Like, I feel like most of Emmy's bookings come from him taking forever to take a goal kick, which is something that, they've obviously tried to clamp down on within the past 18 months. And the World Cup probably did Emmy no favours in that regard. But yeah, it's just one of them, really. I think we do have the room to be nastier, but I just don't think Unai wants that. I think Unai Emery, you're going to have to stick with me here, man, because this is going to sound very weird, but Unai Emery is like the greatest showman, isn't he? He's taken a bunch of rogues and he's like, we're just going to fucking shock everyone. He's not, like, it's different. It's different to Simeone. Like, he's got a point to prove. And like, look, we're literally sat here, as to say, we're talking about going top at Christmas, potentially. And, I know for a fact that the Sheffield United players are well up for it. So it will be a lot more difficult than I think we're probably giving that game credit for. The fact that we're coming into this game, 15 Premier League matches at home, on the spin. This does genuinely have Cameron Archer 1-0, 89th minute written all over it, doesn't it? If ever. But, I mean, to talk about the game a little bit more, buzzing for Moreno's goal, mate. I kind of mentioned this up. He had so many chances. So it's good to see him actually put that one away. And it's funny because, like, the whole Moreno-Dean debate's obviously come up again. And whilst I think at this moment in time, Dean's output is significantly better due to the fact that Moreno is obviously coming back from an injury and that kind of thing, Moreno is just quicker and he's looking to overlap more, and he seems to have a really good understanding with JJ last season, which obviously bled into this game as well. And I don't think we can underestimate how important it is to have that outlet on the left-hand side, where Moreno's looking to make the run before anyone's even thought about passing to him, whereas Dean's almost playing, I would say playing catch-up, but it's like, it's generally a late run. So it offers two completely different things, because with Alex, if the defensive, if Brentford's defensive line aren't as well drilled as ours are, and we saw this many a time, I forget who was playing at right wing back, but there was so much space down that side, and Alex just knew that he could make that run every single time and generally would find himself in a good amount of space. We don't usually see that from Luca, and that isn't a criticism of Luca Dean at all. It's just an observation for me. I love both of them. I don't really have an issue with either player. They're both, to me at least, very different options. So I was very happy for him to be rewarded with his goal, mate. Especially as I'm trying to think, Dean started midweek, didn't he?
Yeah. And
then Alex ended up coming on. And I mean, to be fair, he looked quite tired after this game as well. So we were kind of saying, like, shouldn't he start in midweek? Obviously, Unai knows how to manage these guys. And I mean, I guess it will create an interesting selection dilemma for the Sheffield United game.
Well, this is the thing, mate. This is the thing, is that we've kind of seen that Luca Dean's had a brilliant season. And, I've been very vocal on this podcast about commending him for that, given that it looks at many points in the summer like he could be off. But Alex, that we've seen in the Conference League game against Warsaw and then yesterday against Brentford, that he's just got that extra contribution in the final third. Yeah. And I'm not talking about, but goals as well, which is like incredibly hard to come from at fullback. And dare I say it, maybe that late run to the far post has become a bit of a trademark. We lost Trezeguet. Someone's got to be there. Who is at the far post?
Yes,
Alex Moreno, bang, because they're very similar goals. They are. The Legio one and the Brentford one. He picks up very similar situations and kind of ghosts in at the far post. It's a great ball from Leon Bailey as well. Great ball. The cross is fantastic into Moreno. And it's kind of, I think Bailey is contributing to a goal every 68 minutes or something like that in the Premier League this season. He's had an amazing couple of weeks. Definitely could have considered himself a bit unlucky not to start this game. That will be another one to keep an eye on Friday night, whether it's Bailey or Diaby or whatever the kind of situation is there. There's going to be yet more rejigging of the lineup when you consider the suspensions that we picked up. You know, Powell picks up a knock, it seems. It doesn't look like anything too serious, but you know, it could be rotation in a lot of different places. And that's when we have to get a little bit clever. But there's a really great tweet I saw, actually, I think it's from James Rushton, who was saying that in all of our games this season, after a Europa Conference League group game, we've been undefeated, which is amazing. And really shows Unai's nous for managing those two competitions simultaneously and why he's such an expert in European competition. The fact that, yeah, we're playing Thursday, Sunday a lot of the time, and we're not suffering too much as a result. There's been a couple of draws in there. I think we pick up the Wolves draw, for example, on the back of a Conference League game. But by and large, we've been excellent at rotating the squad, and Unai's really got a good grip of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that can't be understated either. Like, especially when you look at Newcastle, I know they're playing a completely different level, but they've not been able to handle that. And I think that the general narrative around Villa, certainly externally, I don't think people realise how many injuries we've sort of dealt with this season. People have gone, well, where do they have a big injury? Where do they have 3 big injuries? Where do they have 4 big injuries? We had 4 big injuries and we managed to play through that. And, you know, we've still got 2 out. Like, arguably, in Buendia, somebody who we could have really have done with yesterday. He's the kind of guy with his sort of range of passing to unlock a low block like that you really want. Got to give a shout out to Powell. I thought he was phenomenal. I think that, for me, my favourite movement of the game was that Matty Cash chance at the far post that he missed. But that crossing from Powell is just sensational. Like, it is a joke. And like, so many of our players have been brilliant. And I know we're only halfway through the season. I think Pau Torres is our player of the season. I think he's had to overcome a lot in terms of getting up to speed with the Premier League, and he's done that way quicker than I think anybody could have imagined. Even Unai. I think the plan was probably for Pau Torres to start playing semi-regularly in the Premier League now with a fit Tyrone Mings. And we've had to fast-track that development. He's obviously a phenomenal talent. And I don't know many of the players that have that kind of range of passing from centre-half. Like, I've watched that cross-back. I've watched it at least 50 times. I think it's such a good movement. And big ups to Diego as well, because obviously he's come back from the big injury. I feel like he's somebody... I think people are 50-50 on Diego. A lot of people aren't sold. But time and time again, for me, I think he just keeps looking more solid as the weeks go on, mate. And I think them two complement each other really well.
Yeah, it's been a great centre-half partnership. As I say, the only person that is not enjoying this improbable rise of Pau Torres is probably Tyrone Mings.
Yeah.
Because that centre-back partnership looks just immovable right now. It's certainly one that I think both of those guys deserve credit. Pau for obviously not only how quickly he settled into the Premier League, but how he looks just absolutely undroppable right now. And then Diego Carlos to come back from that injury, which I was a little bit worried about, I have to say. Huge shout out to him, but not only, you know, the medical team and everything like that have clearly treated his rehab so perfectly, which is not something we've had a bit of a track record, haven't we, at Villa in recent years, for players getting back to fitness and then picking up knocks and then, you know, going back and forward from the treatment room. This one we seem to have nailed, and I'm really, really happy about that. I think the fact that we have such depth, quality, you know, that Clement Longley just can't get a sniff in the league, given how he's put some really impressive performances in the Conference League, shows just how good those two boys have been. And I feel so safe going into the games now with those guys, Ezri at right back, providing that bit more, that solidarity as well, and that it allows, that's probably why Moreno is free to go and get in those positions that I spoke about, because you can kind of tilt the back four, allow Moreno to bomb on down that left-hand side. Ponza can drop in and sort of form a defensive three with Carlos and Powell, which allows Powell to be a little bit more creative as well. We've picked up these players that just lock into this system so well, and they all complement each other, even the ones that aren't necessarily playing on the same side, like Konsa and Moreno playing on opposite flanks. The relationship that they two have, the understanding of Conte to stay back, to allow Moreno to push on. All just this team just meshes and works really, really nicely. And even when we're making changes, that by and large still kind of feels the same. And it'd be interesting. Yeah, Friday night is a really, really important game. It's a really important game. It won't be as easy as perhaps it would have been a few weeks ago, but we can preview that kind of in due course. But yeah, Torres and Carlos, if you're talking about first names on the team sheet, those boys are definitely up there.
Oh, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And slightly off topic, but I guess it's related. Aston Villa may not be top of the Premier League, but Aston Villa are on top of A-League. This is, I don't know if you've seen this, mate. There's a club in Antigua that's called Aston Villa, and they are top of the table in the Caribbean nation. Antigua and Barbuda. Aston Villa, they've only played 3 games, but they sit top of their league on 7 points. They've got like the early 2000s club crest. This is quite common in Central America and South America. There's like a couple of FC Barcelonas in like Uruguay and Brazil and places like that. And yeah, Aston Villa are currently top of this league. So I wonder if Wes and Nassef are interested in purchasing a club in the Caribbean, mate. Hey, that'd be a great pre-season, wouldn't it? Get us to Antigua.
Yeah. I like that. Well, it's going to be close, mate, because you look at the form that Otto's Rangers are on. Right. They've got good. They've only conceded 3 goals. We've shipped 4 goals in 3 games in Antigua. And look, I know they have been difficult. We have scored 10, and so the goal difference is still superior. But Otto's Rangers are a very good side, as are Grenades.
Old Road. Never sleep on them either, mate.
No, that's true. And then obviously SAP in 5th. They're never too far away when you get into this end of the season. And so, yeah, definitely keep an eye on this league in the Caribbean. I'm really excited to see. It's early days. We're only 3 games in, but when you, that's what I'm saying. Remember the Kazoo title race,
mate? Absolutely,
it's great vibes. You've got to get carried away, and so yeah, I mean that's one league, top Conference League group. So for Aston Villas across the world, it's all going. It's coming up Millhouse, mate.
It is. You love to see it, mate. You love to see it. I'm quite disappointed though because we put off this podcast by an hour or so for the Conference League.
We've got to climb it here,
and it was just a knockout game. It was the qualification games. So we thought we were going to talk about who we were going to play, but
well, we can bring those anyway.
Yeah, why not?
So we'll be facing one of. So you've got Sturm Graz against Slovan Bratislava, Union Saint-Gilloise against Frankfurt, Olympiakos against Ferencváros, Molde against Legia Warsaw, Servette against Ludogorets, Real Betis against Dinamo Zagreb, Ajax against Bodo Glimt, and Maccabi Haifa against Ghent. So one of those, 16 teams, one of them will be Villa's opponents. And we find out next time. We thought that Ghent did get a little sneaky live reaction to the draw. We're not going to get that, but it's still good to know that, there's some great ties in there. Bodo Glimt, that's really fun. Frankfurt Union Saint-Gilloise, that's a really good game. And so there's some teams in there that maybe we would fancy more so than others. But what's good is that in those games, you're going to lose one of Frankfurt or Saint-Gilloise. You're going to lose one of Zagreb or Betis or Ajax and Bodo Glimt. That's what's probably good is that, we're going to lose at least 3 teams that could, really cause Villa a problem, particularly away from home. And so from that angle, all looks okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in any of them draws, to be honest, mate. They all look really tough, and I don't think we can underestimate any of them. So hopefully there can be a few giant killings, but we've seen how much of a scalp we can be in this competition already with Legia. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Thankfully, we're not in Europa League action until March, so plenty of time to think about that. Obviously, we've got the FA Cup as well. That's something that we're going to have to contest with eventually. So the schedule is going to be busy, and as ever, you guys know, Dan and I will be here covering all that for you. So make sure you guys are subscribed. If you've made it this far, Dan raised a very interesting point that a listener brought up the other day that we were talking about off air. Because we changed the thumbnails because we thought we needed to make it sort of more YouTubey, make it more eye catching, and we're still sort of getting a decent amount of views, but a lot of you guys, our actual subscribers, aren't seeing these videos. So if you are a subscriber and you've made it this far, let us know. Make sure you're sharing the content with your friends as well.
Hit the notification button.
Notification bell, that's it. Hit it.
That's the one.
Never miss
Because
it.
you don't need to worry about the thumbnails then, because your phone will tell you straight away.
Exactly. So do that. And yeah, I mean, it's really important that you guys see this, essentially. And we know you guys, there's a core audience of you guys that turn up thick or thin, rain or shine, win or loss. And you guys are real ones. So let us know in the comment section if that is you. Obviously, if you're on Spotify and Apple, what's that? Spotify and Apple, make sure you follow, download, leave a review, give us a 5-star rating. All that stuff really helps. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and up the bell.